Welcome to the skybow webinar, Low Code and High Impact. In this webinar, I will show you how modern low-code solutions in Microsoft 365 can improve productivity, simplify complex processes, and deliver real-world scenarios to end users. I've prepared a lot of demos for you: how to get an authorization token to run automated MS Graph queries with the appropriate permissions, how to build and test complex queries using Postman, and how to build a provisioning workflow with Skybow. And at the end of the webinar, you will have a practical understanding of the prerequisites for automation. Why should we use external data sources for automation? Many valuable information are stored outside of M365. To reduce the workload of employees, workflows should run automatically in the background. A good process should create a working environment in which the user can continue his work efficiently. I'm really sure that you have thousands of ideas. I often use this kind of automation to connect different platforms and hand over information for use cases like at legal, HR, production. And more I use AI within the process to generate pages or documents with the information from different platforms. With this approach, it is possible, for instance, to use OpenAI when you do not have a Copilot license. This means we need a background service that performs certain tasks for us. The service should be controlled and secure so that it does not pose a security risk. And over the next minutes, we will look at some concrete examples and approach the task step by step. One of the most powerful interfaces in M365 is Microsoft Graph. With MS Graph, I can access data from all M365 apps, and I can use data from all external systems that have an integrated MS Graph connector. You can also create and update most of the data using MS Graph. So let's start smart and easy with a great tool of Microsoft, the Microsoft Graph Explorer. And please take a look. When I want to run queries with my personal account in my tenant, then I have to log in person. That will be important at the next steps, whereas the difference between the login, the personal login, and the automated login. So when I take such a sample query, I get the information, but more important for the start is here that tab of the permissions. You see there are predefined permissions. Some of them are really consented and some of them are not. And only the consented permissions I can use here in that graph query. Where that permission comes from, we will see when we switch to Entra ID. And we will take a deeper look in that access token, because that access token is that piece which enables us to run the MS Graph query with all that permissions. When we will take a look to that access token, you can use, or I can recommend you, a tool. It's named JSON Web Token tool. And when we take a look to the claims, I will only point out some details. First of all, we have a expiration time. That is a security feature. A token have a lifetime normally 1 hour. Then we can see the name where the token comes from, where we have authenticated and get the permissions from. It's app registration named Graph Explorer, and it has a certain ID. And when we take a look to the scope, we can see all permissions which are included in the token. So here you can see exactly what you can do with that token. And with that information, we will take a look where it comes from. So we have the token Graph Explorer D8B. And when we take a look to Entra, then we see that we have here our enterprise apps. And within that enterprise app, we find the Graph Explorer with that ID. And here we have the permissions, which you saw also in the Microsoft Explorer. So here we get all permissions, and you see we have to consent it as global administrator, another security feature. When no global administrator will consent that permissions, I can't use it. And against that app, I get the token I have to authenticate. And that's what we want to take a look at when a little bit more theory to understand it. So I want to use in my workflow such a token. I have to make a token request. And here you see the grant type. The grant type is really important when I want to have automated access and no in-person access. We have to hand over client ID, client secret scope. We will see it in Entra ID again in the next step. And then I can authenticate against Entra ID. I get that access token I can use. And with the permission of the access token, I can do all automation things like creating a teams, updating teams, creating SharePoint, creating Viva Engage, and add anything which make Graph possible. So that's what is going on. And when we take a look back, then we see we authenticate against the enterprise app, but the definition of that permissions are coming from the app registrations. And so when we want to use it, we have to go here and we have to start here. In our demos, we want to use an app registration. It's named MS Graph Token. And you see here again, you have an application identifier, that ID, and you can use either client secrets or certificates to make the authentication more secure. We use that value of the client secret, and please keep in mind that value is only shown once when you create it. Afterwards, you can't see it, you can't get it, so note it when you create that client secret so that you can use it for your authentication. And then we can define that API permissions. When I click to add a permission, you see all connectors of Microsoft Graph, and that makes it so powerful because I have so many connectors for nearly all subsystems I can use. And then I can define the permission of my connectors. And another detail you see here, application type. That means when I log in automatically with the workflow, I need that application permission and can't use delegated permissions because they are bind to my user context and not to the automated context. So when you have understand that, then it's really easy to create such an app registration, define that permissions which you need, and to use it and get the token for work with Microsoft Graph. And that brings us to another tool, because Microsoft Graph is great to see what is possible and get a link to our documentations and anything like that. But when you want to go deeper and have really complex queries, then it's good to have a tool where you can make more, and that's the Postman tool. And for instance, you can use that automated authentication so you see that your permissions and your app registration is working like you want to have it. So here you see that form which we saw in our slide. You give in the grant type, you give in the authentication URL, the client ID of the app, and the client secret, and which scope you want to get the permissions from the graph connector. And when you have all together, you can ask for the token, and then you will get a token like we saw in our Graph Explorer before. Great. So, and with that, I said we want to create an advent calendar card. So I have site collection with an advent calendar list. First of all, we want to get the ID of the site collection when I send that query. A great feature of that Postman tool is that I can catch the ID here and I can store it to a variable current site ID and work with it in the next step. When I want to get a list, I have another graph query where I say in that site collection, I want to get a list named Advent Calendar. I run it again, get the ID of that list. And again, I use that list as current list ID. And in the third step, I can use that items get to get the items of that list where the active flag is active, and I get all the data. And with that data, I can work in my workflow. I see exactly what is coming back from the graph query. So it's really helpful. And also in that context, I will copy it because we will use it in the next step. Building that adaptive card. Microsoft is giving us a card designer, which is using a Microsoft Graph API to build up that cards. And if you never did it, the smart things for that designer or that adaptive cards is that you have a web-based designer like here. You can drag and drop elements you want to use. You can configure them directly. You have a graphical overview. And so I put in already a JSON, which is defining the surface. And when I now put in the data, then you see what is happening, that we have a base card. And with that information, where I could play around with it, we can go to the dashboard. And you see here the same what is happening. I click to open the door and get a description, video or an image and a link to the surprise. And when we click to edit, then we can see how it's happening, the card view, you can give the image, the title, and so on. And the more interesting part on that page. So here we have that payload JSON, how the card should look like, which we can build with a designer, the web-based designer. And here we have our query, which we tested in Postman. And when the query is correct, we get the data from it. So everything you tested and prepared in Postman, you can copy and paste here. In with that, you have really in some small steps, you have such a card. And for instance, when I take a look to the list behind and you change that active button, which you normally will do by a skybow workflow or anything like that, and I switch it to the 24th, I go back to the dashboard and refresh. So and then I get that card and I get a video behind it. And that's what I want to show for the first warm-up section, so to say, and to get a simple graph query and use it with that adaptive cards. We want to build powerful workflow and put all together what we have learned till now for a backend service which is using MS Graph to automatically create a Viva Engage community. I often hear from my customers that they have made no good experiences when every user can create a community. Often you get several communities with nearly identical purpose, and nobody knows to use which community for what. And therefore, a solution might be useful to have a pragmatic governance and provisioning workflow. For this demo, I have built a simple list. You can provide a new community. You get at the end the community URL, and you get a log of everything which was happening. And to save time, we want to add a new item. Let's build such a community, and we want share our knowledge about building application with it and save. And now let's take a look what now is happening. I think most of you know already the skybow Solution Studio. Here you can define triggers which are automatically started when, in our case, an item in that provisioning list is added. And let's take a look to the actions. Here we have the steps in our skybow solution. So first of all, we have the HTTP OAuth request, so that we get our token. And you see here all information like client ID, like client secret, like the scope we want to use. And with this, we get back the token. And to create a community, we have to use the user ID for the owner of the community. And in our case, we want to make the author of the request to an owner. And so we send that email to a graph in the user endpoint and get back the ID of that user. And with that ID, we then can start the creation process. So we have that endpoint employee experience communities, which we are using. We authorize against that token, which we discussed already. And then it's not so complicated to hand over the display name, the description, a privacy, and that owner. And at the end, with that call, when it's successful, then we take a look for it. So we filter all communities for that display name of the community we have created. When we get nothing back, we know there is anything happened in between which we haven't catched. But normally we should get back the ID of the community, and with that ID, we can create the URL. And that is the magic behind it. So when we now take back, we have that approach, and we have such a community URL. We see in our logs what happens. We got a graph access token. We got that user ID for the owner. We have created that community without a result that is not coming back from graph. So we ask for the community ID at the end and build that URL. And when we click to the URL, and we get a direct jump to the community. So with that, you can imagine that you can build around any additional stuff with that kind of workflow to build up some great workspaces or communities, or you can enrich your process data with data from outside. There are nearly unlimited possibilities which you have. And unfortunately, in that short time, we can only scratch the surface and are running really wild through the demos. And when you want to dive deeper, I have set up 3 masterclasses to learn how to use that different APIs in more details and with more time and hand-on demos or practice examples which you can build up by your own. In a second masterclass, you can use that knowledge to build up SharePoint pages automatically. That's what I mentioned when you use information and open or artificial intelligence to build up pages automatically for education purposes or information purposes. And the third masterclass is about to automate all perspectives of SharePoint when you want to build up site collections, pages, anything you can do there. You can also automate it based on that examples. So I know it was really, really fast, but I hope it give you inspiration to go a step further and use the REST APIs, especially Microsoft Graph, with that knowledge to build up your own workflows and to satisfy requirements about it. I hope that you have got inspirations to start with great automation workflows using skybow and REST APIs. In this short time, we can only scratch the surface. When you want to get the examples I've used in this webinar, then please contact me at LinkedIn or write an email. When you have any questions or you are interested in one of the masterclasses, then don't hesitate to approach me. I'm looking forward to see you. Thanks and goodbye.